if the low histamine diet fixed so much and it was the go-to solution, we wouldn't have this growing population where actually the figures, so Kleenex, I don't know how they got this, but Kleenex and Allergy Research UK said over 49% of people in the UK suffered from allergies.
The histamine aspect of anxiety is anxiety on steroids.
Yeah.
Like if you're anxious or you're experiencing anxiety, plus you have the histamine link and the histamine related issues, that is anxiety on steroids. As someone that has experienced both parts of anxiety without the histamine factor and anxiety with the histamine factor, you may think you are dying when there's the histamine factor. Just putting that out there.
And so people focus on the low histamine diet because they're like, right, I know that grapes don't agree with me, or I know tomatoes don't agree with me. So if I remove it, I can still function. And everything we do is to continue functioning because you can't just stop work and go, right, I'm just going to disappear and stop working, or I'm going to start looking after my family. That's why people focus on diet. But the issue, the big issue with low histamine diet is you're restricting your body from certain specific foods and nutrients and vitamins and minerals.
You know, if you're really, really struggling with histamine issues, and the first thing that you do is you start to reduce foods that are high in histamine, then you will feel a massive difference because let's be honest, histamine overload messes you up.
What people aren't talking about is what actually causes that intolerance in the first instance. T. I want to chat about the low histamine diet.
Of course you do.
Right. I was like building the notes for this, right? And obviously, whenever we do our Instagram, any time we do our Instagram, the most popular, I'm going to use the word influencers, always go back to diet, right? But
not just influencers. I mean, I think any histamine
medical
issue
market, yeah.
Today, you go to your doctor, your dietitian, your nutritionist, your favorite influencer, whatever, they're going to talk low histamine diet. So let's be fair.
Yeah, okay.
Be fair to the influencers.
Okay, be fair to influencers. Everyone's talking about the low histamine diet, right? And the reason why I want to bring up as a topic, it's because I personally think that yes, it's helpful, but it doesn't fix histamine in symptoms. Because every single person I've spoken to, and I've been doing this for time now. I'm nearly 12 years in the histamine market.
I mean, you're old, so like it's been time. Yeah, I get you.
I'm 12 years into the low histamine diet, and I haven't met someone who's gone, oh, I did the low histamine diet and it cured me.
Yeah.
There's the odd person here and there where I've seen like, they've done really, really well off it. But most people have found that their histamine symptoms are really still there. And their diet is getting restricted more and more and more. And let's be honest, if the low histamine diet fixed so much and it was the go-to solution, we wouldn't have this growing population where actually the figures, so Kleenex, I don't know how they got this, but Kleenex and Allergy Research UK said over 49% of people in the UK suffered from allergies, including, and I think around about 20% of that was related to food allergies. So you're telling me that the low histamine diet's a solution to it? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much it's like specifically said this is the treatment or solution, more so than like, in like an excited way of like, we found it, this is the solution, more so than it's just this is the best we got, and you and I know that it isn't the best we got, and we will get into that. But I think just for anyone listening out there, there's a reason that the low histamine diet is the go-to, because actually histamine issues and histamine related symptoms and all of that, even beyond allergies, but particularly as it pertains to this massive increase in allergies, because food allergies and seasonal allergies and things were not as prevalent even just a few decades ago as they are today. I think we've very quickly come into a space where histamine is becoming a big issue, and so we're scrambling to catch up with the research. And so a lot of people's go-to is, well, listen, the low histamine diet is all I got.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of issues with the low histamine diet. And I don't know, do you want to go straight into that? Do you want to have a little bit of a discussion about what histamine is? I'm assuming everyone that's listening probably is quite queued up on histamine.
Yeah.
Like, it's essentially just a chemical that has a role in a lot of major bodily functions, including, you know,
A major role
Uh,
in most bodily functions.
I said a major role. Okay. So, like, you know, digestion, it helps to stimulate stomach acid,
Sleep-wake cycle.
sleep-wake cycle,
eating.
signals to the brain, nerve signaling, you know, pain, all of that kind of stuff. But I think one of the most prevalent places that it works is as part of the immune response to like allergy or injury or things like that. So that's a really big place.
It's a flag.
It's a flag.
It lets know the body something's going on.
It's like, hey, something's wrong here.
Yeah.
And then I think just to maybe quickly cover some of the histamine related conditions and like signs and symptoms, just like a quick thing for anyone who mightn't be as familiar, because you obviously know like allergies, you think histamine immediately, like hay fever, food intolerances, things like that. Maybe you think kind of skin issues like eczema, stuff like that. But I think a lot of people don't think of, you know, hormonal imbalances like menopause or, you know, cycle irregularities, or, I mean, I don't know what other common ones you think of, chronic pain. What are big kind of conditions and ailments you come in contact with?
I mean, if you follow us on Instagram, I did a video on the histamine receptors. So histamine attaches to specific receptors in the body, and those receptors are what control different functions. So you have your histamine 1, histamine 2, histamine 3, histamine 4. And so you've got like your histamine 1, which is related to allergies. That's in your skin, your sinuses. That's what's most linked to hay fever, pollen, and, you know, dust mites, those allergies. You have your H2, which is hits in your stomach. That's more for acid secretion, its role.
There's your gut issues, your IBS, your IBD, your
Correct. Gut inflammation, the
bloating.
whole lot of it.
farting.
Yeah. Then the histamine 3 receptor, which is involved in the central nervous system, that, as I said, controls our nausea, it controls our heart rate, it controls our sleep and wake cycle, it controls our stress, our fight and flight response. And you'll see a lot of
Heart
people,
palpitations.
a lot of people with high histamine, the amount of them that suffer from anxiety.
Oh yeah.
And if you talk about anxiety with histamine, it's most like, oh, you're probably just overstressed or depressed because of your health issues. And it's like, no, there's actually a chemical role in stress.
Oh, the histamine aspect of anxiety is anxiety on steroids.
Yeah.
Like if you're anxious or you're experiencing anxiety, plus you have the histamine link and the histamine related issues, that is anxiety on steroids. As someone that has
100%.
experienced both parts of anxiety without the histamine factor and anxiety with the histamine factor, you may think you are dying when there's the histamine factor. Just putting that out there.
But it's the heart palpitations that people don't think about. And then the most recently, the histamine 4 receptor, and I talked about this before, what's fascinating is its role in rheumatoid arthritis, because they find the mast cells in the joints. Because I think a lot of people, when they talk about mast cells, they'll always talk about the gut mast cells.
Yeah,
But mast cells are located around the whole system.
Well,
And-
also on the nerves, like, you find the histamine receptors on nerves, which is like a whole massive thing in the pain and chronic pain community now as well.
Yeah.
So it's really kind of out there.
And so this brings me back to the low histamine diet.
Yeah,
The
back to
reason
low histamine
the
diet.
reason why the low histamine diet, I think has been touted as a solution, right? It's because we're in control of it, because you control what you're putting into your system. You're able to control like the food that you're eating. And so people focus on the low histamine diet because they're like, right, I know that grapes don't agree with me, or I know tomatoes don't agree with me. So if I remove it, I can still function. And everything we do is to continue functioning, because you can't just stop work and go, right, I'm just going to disappear and start working, or I'm going to start looking after my family. That's why people focus on diet. But the issue, the big issue with low histamine diet is you're restricting your body from certain specific foods and nutrients and vitamins and minerals.
Yeah, but I think before we go into some of the downsides, I think like let's kind of feel out the positives of a low
Oh,
histamine
100%.
diet,
There are positives,
a
yeah.
little bit more in terms of
Mm.
no, but you hit the nail on the head there. It's simple. It's like a simple kind of thing to do. It's an easy prescription, and it's not easy, but I mean in terms of like it fits into a box. It's like, oh, you have histamine issues, here's what you do: go on a low histamine diet, tidy, tick box, done. It's also free, which is a really, really big thing. You know,
You can go
we
on
don't
Google,
all
yeah,
have the
type
same
of
access to the same standard of
yeah.
healthcare, so it's free. And also, I think it does have quite an immediate effect in most cases. You know, if you're really, really struggling with histamine issues, and the first thing that you do is you start to reduce foods that are high in histamine, then you will feel a massive difference, because let's be honest, histamine overload messes you up. It's not fun. So if you can reduce that histamine quantity that you're exposed to in any way, so reducing high histamine foods, it's going to make a massive difference. It's like, you know, that histamine bucket. Say that histamine bucket is filled with water instead of histamine. You remove, you know, a few cups of water from that bucket and all of a sudden it stops overflowing. It's the same thing with the low histamine diet. You remove some high histamine foods and all of a sudden it stops going apeshit. But that's short term.
I mean, and that's it. It's short term because you're taking away your food that your body's reacting to, but then your triggers change. And then what happens is a lot of people's starting point is to do a food intolerance test, which is just like crazy, because a food intolerance test, though they can give you like a bit of information to kind of go into, they're not indicative of a true intolerance. A true intolerance is like a dairy allergy or a wheat allergy or a gluten allergy. They're true intolerances.
It is interesting to me that like food intolerance tests are being utilized a lot in the kind of histamine world.
Yeah, me too.
And like I can kind of understand it in the sense that a lot of people's route into discovering that they have a histamine issue is actually reactivity to food. So, you know, they might have, I mean, food intolerance, sensitivity, allergy, it's all on a scale, with, you know, an allergy being really severe and a sensitivity being a little bit more gentle, intolerance somewhere in the middle. So I understand it in a way, because I think that can be the first place where people actually think, oh, I have a histamine issue. And it can be helpful. Like, I actually don't completely poo-poo food intolerance tests, because it can be helpful in some instances, because particularly if you are that person that gets a food intolerance test and you're seemingly intolerant to like a million different things, and even some foods that like you've rarely been exposed to, then it's a pretty good indication that actually it's not true intolerance, it's a histamine issue. Whereas, you know, if you come up where you're intolerant to like one food that actually you've always seemingly had issues with, or there's a history in your family, then you're probably a little bit closer to the scale of like allergy intolerance level. So it's not nothing. But I can see.
Let me right. You know I like to test the waters a little bit, right?
Go on.
And I'll say drop a little bit of information, right? Okay. So people do the food intolerance test, right? And it's been touted as pretty, you know, you do a tolerance test, you can work out what you need, right? The thing I've got to ask, right, is what people aren't talking about is what actually causes that intolerance in the first instance. Because food's the go-to, but why is no one talking about the overactive immune system? And if you look at the people that have a histamine overload, and yes, it's a histamine overload, it's not an intolerance, because you can't be intolerant to something your body naturally produces. But if you look at the cause of it, the root cause is an overactive immune system. And people have put that in for food. So they look at histamine in the food, but they're not talking about the other chemicals or the other things our body's exposed to, or the fact that our immune system is in a heightened state. And so taking away that food doesn't remove the heightened state of the immune system.
Oh, 1000%.
But no one's talking about that.
Oh, no, they're not. And like, that's, I guess, to finish on the intolerance test bit, like, I think the major downside of them is that people tend to use them and then they go on this protocol where they remove all of those foods and job done, box ticked, but it's not ticked at all.
Because your immune
That's
system
not a
needs
solution
that.
at all.
Your gut needs that food, and it needs that because your immune system starts in your gut. Is that or is that not factually correct? It starts in the gut. So if you're taking away foods that your body needs and nutrients your body needs, you're impacting your immune system. So what's your immune system going to do? It's going to be heightened and be more reactive, and it's going to release more antibodies. And for anyone that wants to know a bit more about histamine overload and the reason why it happens, it's down to antibodies. So what happens is your immune system, when it thinks that something is bad, it releases these antibodies, and these antibodies travel around the body and they attach to mast cells. And so you've probably heard of mast cells. And these mast cells are like, someone's referred to them as like the warning signals. Those mast cells contain biogenic amines, and what will happen is the IgE they will sit on top of those mast cells, so they're like an antenna to let these mast cells know that something's going on. And then what will happen is these IgE are programmed to detect allergens, and you've got to remember your immune system picks what it thinks is an allergen, and I'm going to emphasize that word thinks, T. It's not like, it's going, it picks out what it thinks is an allergen. So it could be something as menial as coffee or something like, even as people say, they become allergic to air or even water. And what will happen is when that allergen that the body thinks is going to, cause a problem, it releases histamine, and alongside those other agenic amines, they spread around the system and they create inflammation. And inflammation is a barrier. So it's protecting the body from those toxins from causing more harm. And the issue is, if you take away food, the immune system's still overreactive. The immune system doesn't suddenly go, oh, you've taken away the food and we're completely fine and completely sorted. And here's a question. Anyone who's doing a low histamine diet, tell me how many of you have actually started reintroducing the foods that you react to. That's my question to you.
Yeah, well, I think you've almost just finished the point there, in the sense of, one of the major downsides of the low histamine diet is that it doesn't actually address all of the other triggers and contributors to histamine overload. Like, it just doesn't address that at all.
But why? I just don't understand why.
Well, no, I think it's how the system works or has worked for, millennia, is that we kind of find something where, oh, you're having histamine issues, and, oh, food, something that you consume every single day, has various histamine levels. There's some high histamine, there's low histamine foods. Oh, when I eat lower histamine foods, I feel a bit better. So we deduce, oh, low histamine diet equals no histamine issues. But also, I think it comes back to, the two main working theories around an overproduction of histamine. So one being the case of allergies or MCAS or gut dysbiosis or something like that. And I think you covered that a little bit in what you were saying. But the other one being this idea of an impairment in your DAO enzyme. So your DAO enzyme is an enzyme in the gut, essentially, that breaks down excess histamine. And there's, there can be many factors, but likely, medications, stress, genetics, those have been found to impair, like in the terms of slow down or reduce the ability of DAO to break down histamine. And so I think when you're thinking in the context of that, and particularly because it's an enzyme that's in the gut and breaking down histamine in the gut, we just automatically associate that with diet. And so I think we've just kind of built in that narrative. Whereas actually, in reality, if you look at the studies around the DAO enzyme, we know that there's there's a threshold for how much histamine that whole system can actually break down in and of itself. And there's a lot of people that are out histamining that threshold in and of itself. So the body's natural inbuilt system for processing out excess histamine is in itself, even if it's, I mean, the idea is that if it's impaired, is that it can't keep up. But I would argue that based on the research, even in the case where maybe it seems relatively okay or there isn't a clear impairment, some people are getting so much excess histamine in their body because they're reacting so heavily to their environment in ways that we never did previously,
Yeah.
that the DAO enzyme, that natural function, can't keep up.
And HNMT as well.
And HNMT.
Because they're overtaxed and they're
Yeah.
overworked. And then you've got to remember things like black tea, green tea, they can also inhibit diamine oxidase
Yeah.
production. Alcohol inhibits it. But wait, there's one more. One thing that people have forgot to talk about with histamine. So you also have the other hygienic amines.
I know. But before you go on to that,
Okay.
just with the DAO,
Yeah.
because of discovering this DAO enzyme, there's been so much work into developing a supplemental form of DAO enzyme
Yeah.
with the idea that it can break down even more histamine. But again, we actually don't have the research really to show that adding more DAO enzyme will actually break down
It's doing
more,
nothing to the immune system.
will actually break down more histamine. So we don't, it's kind of shoddy at best. Like there's still a lot more research that needs to be done. So we don't know if that actually is a legit way of breaking down more histamine. But sorry, what you were saying, there's technically a third working theory, but the two we covered are kind of the most commonly known. But we were talking about this.
When I was doing my research into histamine, I did a presentation, right? And because I spend a lot of time just reading the research papers. It's something I find it fascinating to read some of them. And then I started looking at putrescine and cadaverine. And oh my God, when I started reading these studies, I was like, there's more even to it. Like I thought I know histamine, but I don't know histamine. Like I know enough to kind of like have a conversation with people.
I don't know. You know histamine, to be fair.
But there's more to it. So putrescine, cadaverine are other biogenic amines that are found in food. And putrescine is actually what creates that putrid smell. And the cadaverine is actually part of corpses. So what happened? You know that they call it a cadaver for a dead corpse, right? That cadaverine is what the enzyme that breaks the body down to help decomposition. But putrescine and cadaverine are actually really important to the body. So when they're in the system, they actually help with cellular growth. But the problem is too much. And when there's too much of it in the system, it can actually add to that aging process because it's overstimulating the growth factor of it. So do you know what happens? The diamine oxidase seeing that increase in putrescine and cadaverine, by the way, it's found a lot in fish, hence why fish, that has that rotting smell, found a lot in meat as well, for I think like from chickens as well and beef.
Well, so anyone that follows the low histamine diet, they know that generally lower histamine foods are fresh foods, except in the case of like fish, for example, because as it's killed, it starts releasing histamine. So you want that frozen. So that's the reason.
Yeah, but then like it gets more into it because as that's putrefying and it's going through that process, it's releasing that putrescine. And what will happen is the diamine oxidase, knowing that it's more toxic to the system, will actually favor putrescine and cadaverine over the histamine. So then you're now looking at that. So yes, I'm going to add that's where the histamine diet can play a role because you're actually taking away the putrescine and cadaverine, which could be impacting it. And people do say, like I've had before, where people said like, oh, I removed fish from my diet and that really, really helped. And there's certain meats that they removed from the system and it really benefited them. So there is an argument with the low histamine diet, and I do see that, but there's more. It's more than just histamine, and that's what we need to realize.
Oh, for sure. Like this isn't like a low histamine diet bashing session.
Yeah.
Like in fact, I actually still think it's really good to go on to like not necessarily the low histamine diet, but actually to look at the high histamine foods in your
Triggers.
diet that are triggering, or foods that maybe you're sensitive to, or you have an intolerance to, or maybe make you slightly bloated. Like I actually think it's a good practice to go through that because it helps you pay attention to the foods you're consuming.
Yeah.
And it helps you to like understand how your body reacts to different foods. Plus, in a lot of cases, you know, even though a low histamine diet isn't the solution, for some people there may be some certain foods that they struggle to reintroduce. So say in the standard kind of elimination low histamine diet approach, in theory, you should be trying to reintroduce because, as we say, eating low histamine for the rest of your life is challenging, and we actually should probably go into some of the things
boring.
around that.
It's boring.
But any foods that flagged up an intolerance test, the goal should be reintroduction, because we should be trying to eat as many foods, healthy foods, actual foods, that we can as possible, because that's really important for diversity in our microbiome and things like that. But for a lot of people, because of a myriad of other things, mainly living in a modern society, stress, medications, perfumes, yada yada, there may be foods that we really struggle to reintroduce, and that maybe they need to reduce or remove long term. That's fine. So there definitely, as we were talking about, can be a role for a conscientiousness about, high and low histamine foods, or, foods that we may have a sensitivity or intolerance to. But again, it's not a treatment. It's not looking at the root cause. It's not solving anything except your immediate, kind of panic level of histamine overload symptoms. That's all it's doing.
And I think that's the main thing that people look at, is they want a quick fix so they continue their lives. And it's the same with antihistamines. I have the same conversation with so many people who are on, and I'm going to use the word chronic antihistamines, and I know that's probably the wrong word to use for it, but these people are on taking 4 antihistamines, the same ones,
long-term
every
users,
single day.
yeah.
And that's not a long-term solution, because
well, they shouldn't, I don't know if people have looked into it, but those drugs were never made for long-term use. So.
Oh, T, you better not say that. We'll probably get cancelled. Right. I'm going to bring you to something, right? That showed me a little bit more about histamine. When I was doing my research into the histamine aspect of it, and I was saying that there's more than the low histamine diet, right? I'm going to read a quote from the Journal of Allergy and Immunology, and I'll put it in the description if you want to read more about it. The ability of combustion products, such as diesel exhaust particles, to modulate the immune system has now been firmly established. DEPs, so diesel exhaust particles, can synergize with allergens at the human upper respiratory mucosa to enhance allergen-specific IgE production.
Yeah.
So, okay, that's one little little factoroonie there, right? That's a pretty big journal as well. And then here's another one for you. This is from the Cellular Molecular Gastroenterology and Hepatology Journal. Findings indicate that oral exposure to aluminium at the human dietary level reproduces clinical and molecular features of IBS, highlighting a new pathway of prevention and treatment of visceral pain in some susceptible patients. I read that study and I was fascinated by it, right? They looked at aluminium in foods, and they actually cited another paper, which I'm just going to bring up and just say it anyway. And this is from the Journal of Neuroinflammation. Mercury induces inflammatory mediator release from human mast cells. So it's not just the IgE and the antibodies that are triggering that mast cell reaction and release.
It's not just the histamine in the food.
It's the heavy metals. It's the toxins.
But this is, you've brought up a really interesting point, and this is genuinely what makes me quite sad about this situation, and why I'm so happy to be talking about the low histamine diet, is that there's so many people out there who are in a very vulnerable place and who are feeling like shit. Let's be honest. Can I say shit?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, of course. It's all right. It's online now, so it's fine.
And they're tackling arguably one of the hardest things to do in a health journey. I would argue that changing your diet is out of all of the things that you can do in a health journey, take supplements, take drugs, start exercising, talk therapy, clean up your home, look at mold and mycotoxins, all of the things that you could be doing for your health. I think maybe that's just me personally, changing your diet is the hardest thing to do, because it's not just tied to, nourishing your body. It's tied to what you can afford to buy. It's tied to cravings and flavor. It's tied to social and emotional aspects. eating foods we love is a very emotional thing. It's a very social thing. It can create anxiety because you can't go, just go to a restaurant that you enjoy or call over to your friends for dinner because you're nervous about like, oh, does it have a high histamine food? Or, oh, did you use fresh fish or frozen fish? It's such a difficult thing to do. And so the people that actually manage to scrape together the strength, and I do mean strength, because to focus on that and really do that low histamine diet and do it perfectly and do it really, really well, and for that not to be it, for them to still be crumbling and still not feel amazing, that genuinely makes me upset. Because particularly on top of that, if you're told, well, you did the thing that you're supposed to do, generally the response is, oh, well, you're just not doing it properly, or you're just not trying hard enough, or, it's because you still have slip-ups sometimes, or, oh, it's because, maybe there's that other food that you're also reacting to now. And it's always like the pressure and, onus is pushed on that person. And I'm like, get a grip.
Yeah. But it brings you to the point, like saying that, like, this is why I said you need to work with a clinician. You need to find a practitioner who understands histamine and find a practitioner who's going to look at your diet and help you clean it up and look at the triggers and then say, this is what you need to eat. This is like the real food that you need to eat for your system. And taking out certain, even like oils, for example, that your body could react to. And the thing is,
because you need to be looking at the quality of your food as well. Like 100%. I would argue that, okay, in the very immediate response, kind of like triage aspect of a histamine issue, sure, pull down some of those like high histamine foods, and particularly any foods that you're reacting to, because most people know what they're reacting to. Dairy. But I think another aspect, if we're really looking at diet as an approach to histamine, is that we need to be looking at like diet quality, and dare I say diet cleanliness, which is probably like a dangerous thing to say. But as you said, like if you're consuming industrial seed oils or products with industrial seed oils, are you washing your produce? Are you getting organic produce? And I don't mean just washing your produce in water. Like I mean like properly getting that veggie scrub, because it's covered in like all sorts of different pollutants. Are you looking at your household products? Are you looking at your makeup and your skincare products? And you're like, are you living in a city? Are you looking at, your house? Do you have furniture that's, has VOCs that are offsetting, like offset gases, because it's new furniture from all of the dyes and glues in that? Are you living in a house that has damp or mold? All of these myriad of things.
And it's overwhelming.
Oh, yeah. But all of these myriad of things that could be massively triggering your histamine issues, the same, if not more so than food. And yet you're told to put all of your attention on something food, that is the least fun aspect of getting healthy, is trying to adjust your diet. And then you do all of that and you're told you're failing, because your symptoms still aren't going away, because you're not looking at all of the other things.
And then they'll blame the practitioner or blame the person. And the thing is, practitioners aren't taught this. And we're taught
that's true.
And we're not taught about histamine. And even medical doctors aren't taught about histamine. And then, even now, the big journals and some of the big people in the industry are still using the word histamine intolerance. No, I'm sorry, I'm a bit passionate about this. Stop calling it histamine intolerance, you jackasses. It's not an intolerance, because that's why people are looking at you sideways. They're giving you the side eye because you're calling it an intolerance. It's not. It's an overactive immune system which causes histamine.
To something your body naturally produces. And by the way, for anyone wondering, your body produces all of the histamine that it needs.
Yeah.
So.
And the thing is, we blame food, right? But histamine is part of something called decarboxylation. It's that process. It's part of a fermentation process for wine, for cheese, for bread.
All
and
that
the
good
thing
stuff.
is, but all the good stuff that we enjoy. And if you look at bread, right? Let's go to a proper bakery where they've got like 3 ingredient, flour. You actually take that, that's part of that fermentation process. It's part of that system. That bread's delicious, and we should be able to eat it and drink wine. It's all part of a process. And so they're all natural foods, I would argue, because you're not adding anything into them. It's
Well,
part of that
if
process.
you're buying those foods still in a form that they are like natural, because
I'm not talking craft cheese slices, right?
I know, but like not to add, and like there's so many conversations to have on this, and I don't want to add another layer of complication, but you know, in some ways sometimes it's difficult just to say bread, cheese and wine nowadays, because there's a
Yeah.
massive difference between, you know, some like sourdough bread that's made from really high quality flour and, you know, high quality water, salt, doesn't have all the binders and fillers and synthetic nutrients and bleaches or whatever.
Fortified.
Yeah. Which again, lots of people would go and get the fortified bread thinking they're making a good decision. But, you know, there's a massive difference between that or, you know, like organic wine that, you know, comes from a region where they have strict regulations in place in terms of like how the grapes are sprayed and, you know, protected or whatever. And cheese that like comes from high quality dairy that has actually properly been goes through the proper aging process instead of like using chemicals or different kind of industrial approaches to speed up that. So I think, you know, even within saying the term for different foods, there's so much more going into that. So I just think that's an important caveat when we're talking about you should be able to eat these foods, but, you know, you probably shouldn't ever be able to eat the crap version of those.
Yeah. Well, actually, you make that joke, right? But a personal story, like we switched to organic for a lot of our foods now because of Rivi. But do you remember like about 2 months ago when I bought I think it was like because we normally buy M&S organic cheese, and that's what we normally go through when we're going to have some cheese in our food, right? I bought an organic cheese, and then I bought a generic supermarket finest cheese, and I was like, because I thought, oh, okay, I couldn't find the organic one there, and I thought I'll try the finest one out, you know, probably going to be good. My stomach just didn't sit right with it. And I don't know what was in the cheese or what it was. Maybe I was just having a bad day. So I'm not saying it was the cheese and blaming it, but I just felt a bit like, oh, this wasn't, I'm not feeling this. And so it does show you that the role of food, and we've had it recently when we've bought snacks or snacking when we're busy, when we've had like the processed snacks, me and you've just gone, oh, my stomach does not feel good.
Which is really interesting, I think, because, I mean, arguably we have a very healthy diet and lifestyle. We don't struggle with like a lot of different ailments or whatever, but something that we decided to get really, really particular on, which I'll throw my hands up. I knew about this all along. I was just being lazy.
Yeah. When I met Tracy, she didn't even need to wash her kale. And I used to judge you so hard. I still remember in the flat in London. I was like, did you wash that? And you would look at me and you'd be like, yeah.
I throw my hands up. Like, it's something that I knew about a lot, but I was holding strong to those studies and theory about like, well, it's more important to eat, you know, lots of fruit and veggies, even if it's non-organic, than to eat the organic stuff. And because I ate like shit tons of vegetables, I was like, it's fine. Even though I knew better, because it's not, it is still more important to eat fruits and veg, even if it's not organic or if it's unwashed. But like, you can feel even better if you wash all that like gunk and environmental pollutants and stuff off it. And I will say, like, literally nothing in our diet changed, but we just started like religiously washing the fruits and vegetables, and we did move to kind of organic across the board as opposed to like little bits and pieces.
We tried to be as organic as possible.
And it was fascinating. First of all, like how quickly I felt incredible, like another level, because I wasn't even feeling bad. So like, this is the thing, like I wasn't even feeling bad to begin with, but then it was like almost this next level of like feeling healthy that I didn't even realize I could. And I work in the industry. But what was even more fascinating was, I think when we were traveling or whatever, and we didn't have, I think we just ate maybe, some more kind of snacky snacks, as we like to call them, that, you know, have a few more ingredients or whatever. and how quickly we both felt really, really shit. And that didn't happen before. You know, like I could get away with eating, you know, crap things here and there because I had that baseline of health and I didn't do that very frequently. And I could get away with it. But there was something about getting rid of those like chemicals, extra chemicals in the system that like all of a sudden my body felt so great that if I got a few of those in my diet again, I was like, ooh, don't feel so good.
Yeah.
There's something different going on. But I feel like we're going a little bit off on a tangent with the histamine. So I want to bring you back to I think we covered most of the downsides of the low histamine diet. I mean, a big thing for me, again, just focusing on the diet, is that it's the hardest part. Why are we making ourselves start with the hardest part when we're already in a vulnerable position?
Yeah.
You know, get yourself to just a place where you can start to feel a little bit better and then tackle, you know, some of the really hard bits. Because I'm not against like hard work, but I'm just like, stop setting ourselves up for failure. My God, it's not fun. Food is fun. But that aside, I think maybe we should talk a little bit about some of the alternatives to the low histamine diet.
Yeah, I mean, the alternatives like are interesting. So I always say to like people talk about quercetin, for example. Quercetin as being an alternative product that you should
People,
use.
I mean, I
Yeah,
speak about it a lot, or at least I used to before I came across using binders. But like before we ever knew each other and before I ever became a practitioner or like worked in this world at all, I was on the like quercetin, vitamin C, bromelain, things
yeah.
like that, which, you know, they can be very helpful. And it basically, I have horrendous hay fever. And so before the allergy season started, I would like, you know, compound all of those supplements, build them up in my system on top of the low histamine diet. And it definitely made a difference. So like they do work in the sense. But what I would say about that routine is while I was absolutely thrilled because I literally could not go outdoors. That's how bad my hay fever was. Like I had to stay indoors at school when all my friends were going out to play. So like getting over that was amazing. But the problem with that routine is that I had to be perfect. So I had to start it a few months in advance of allergy season hitting. And I had to be absolutely like perfect, meticulous with not having any high histamine foods, staying away from histamine liberators. I had to be really careful with, you know, barriers, washing myself, everything like that, as in washing the pollen off myself. And so, yes, in theory, it can help, but like when it's the summer and you want to have ice cream and chill, like that's quite stressful. So, and it's quite isolating because I felt I couldn't partake in, you know, family and friend activities. So that's what you'll often hear. You know, I think those supplement protocols often sit alongside the low histamine diet. And we're not saying they don't work to reduce histamine because they do, but it's a very, very challenging way of going about it.
Well, it's like,
and also not a root cause solution.
Like quercetin, for example, has been used quite a lot, and I see it a lot in all the histamine groups, and a lot of practitioners recommend it. And the funny thing is, what you got to remember is quercetin doesn't get rid of histamine.
Yeah, no,
it's
exactly.
a mast cell wall stabilizer. It's been shown to work. It's a natural form of sodium chromoglycate, and sodium chromoglycate it's the pharmaceutical version of keeping mast cells from breaking up and releasing that histamine.
Essentially what these supplements are doing is that they're helping with the inflammatory aspect. You have to be absolutely perfect to get relief on that routine of the supplements and your diet. Plus, you might also find that you still need to use antihistamines on top of that in peak, you know, pollen season, and you still will have some symptoms, but they might be a little bit milder. So all I'm saying is it isn't a solution because you're trying to be absolutely perfect and it doesn't actually get rid of anything 100%, particularly when you're exposed to high levels of whatever your allergen may be. I'm just using pollen as an example for me.
It's like immune dysregulation. I
Yeah.
think the biggest adjustment for me personally, and what I say to every single person that I talk to and work with, I always say to them, you need to address the immune system because it's an immune dysregulation that's causing this. It's an overactive immune response. That's what IgE releases are. That's the root cause of mast cell activation syndrome, and that's the root cause of histamine overload, immune dysregulation.
Oh,
And
and
that's where things like vitamin D play a role, vitamin C play a role, and that's why people find so many histamine market find a benefit from vitamin C. But bring in vitamin D as well. Look at those. Look at colostrum, for example.
But you see, so you're taking that though to the long-term solution, whereas I'm really thinking in the kind of on the war field. What's that word? On the where do you fight when there's a war? On the war ground? What's that term I'm looking for? On the battlefield.
On the battlefield.
Oh my God, baby brain. So like what I'm really thinking of right now in the context of the low histamine diet is like what you're doing on the battlefield when you have this massive histamine overload to pull it down. Everything you said is correct in terms of like the long term how to solve the root cause, but I almost feel like that's another video entirely because there's so much to say. So what I want to focus on while we're still we've covered the low histamine diet, we've talked about like the upsides, downsides of supplements, we've talked about the fact of kind of antihistamines, we've briefly touched on that. Again, I think that would be a good extra video. But what I want to get to next is binders, because when I came across binders, and particularly zeolite clinoptilolite, Toxaprevent, I'm not going to lie, it made me really, really happy. And you want to know the reason? It opened up the option of wine and cheese and ice cream in the summer, which is something that I hadn't been able to do for decades.
Yeah.
Okay, not too many decades. I'm not that old. But at least, because I probably wouldn't have been having wine as a child anyway. But like a long time, it's opened that up. And also, and by open that up, I mean that it's given me an option where I can keep my histamine issues under control while still enjoying life a little bit, instead of it kind of being like, summer.
Yeah.
This is going to suck.
It's like another thing that you can add to your arsenal and use a binder.
So talk a little bit about the role of binders. And I guess, I don't know, do you want to go into all binders? But I kind of think zeolite as it relates to histamine is probably one of the most prominent ones. But I think, again,
don't go into binders too
I
much,
know
because this
that's
is a completely
the thing. That's why I don't want you to
don't go into it too much, because this is going to be a completely separate video.
I don't want you to go off of one. So let's do that as a different. Let's go on to all binders as a different video. But what I really want to get your thoughts on is the use of Toxaprevent, but specifically as it pertains to that immediate histamine overload and cascade, and like, what can I do to support my histamine issues now? Not talking about, the long-term approach of, prevention and getting your immune system back into balance and everything, but if I'm someone that is struggling right now, like I have irregular cycles, my eyes are watering, I'm itching everywhere, I have terrible eczema, I can't eat, cheese and wine, and I'm getting heart palpitations, how can Toxaprevent work for me?
Toxaprevent is a histamine binder. The whole process and the whole premise of it is that it's like a sponge. It goes in, it soaks up all the histamine, and alongside other toxins like heavy metals, ammonium, that our body's exposed to, including other agenic amines. So yeah, Puccini cadaverine, we're coming for you. And all it does is it binds to it and it removes it from the system via the stool. It's not working like diamine oxidase, where it's an enzyme breaking it down, and the histamine's still going to go to the system.
And then the body still has to release it out of the system. It's taking it out of the system for you. Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
Like,
it's basically a sponge.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's more to it, which we, again, should cover in another video. But we have meetings on our
channel anyway.
We have meetings we need to get to. But I think, just as an analogy or a picture for people watching that mightn't be familiar, it's essentially like, okay, your body has too much histamine overload, intolerance, whatever you want to call it, but it is an overload. Don't worry. When you're getting all of your symptoms overwhelmed, taking Toxaprevent, it's essentially just mopping up that extra histamine in the body, and it's removing it as well. So it's binding to it, it's removing it from your system. And then you're going to feel an immediate difference, because like we said, with the immediate difference people often feel with food is you've reduced your histamine load, you've reduced that histamine bucket, whatever terminology you want to use. And so you have created breathing room for yourself. You've created that breathing room where you're not immediately reacting to everything.
Empty and refill.
Empty and refill. And so, yes, you can stay on that cycle of empty and refill if you want. Personally, I always have some Toxaprevent during the summer just because I do want to eat some ice cream sometimes. I do want some wine in the park sometimes. But there is another aspect to Toxaprevent where it goes into the kind of prevention and healing the root cause. But I do think that's probably for another video. But just in terms of nicely pulling off that point of other approaches to histamine other than the low histamine diet, I think binders definitely are one.
Yeah, they're a solution. And what I'll do is in the description, I'll whack a link to Toxaprevent.
Not all binders, but...
Yeah, not all binders. But what I'll do is I'll link up the description. I'll explain the protocol, how the protocol works. And if you go to our YouTube channel and hit that subscribe button now and just go to our YouTube channel, you will see videos explaining Toxaprevent, and it explains histamine. And if you follow us on Instagram, all of the content on histamine, from histamine receptors, it's all spoken on there.
Oh, and please do give us a like for this video if you do like it, because it just encourages us and it helps us know what kind of content you're enjoying. And yeah, we're happy to make more videos like this as well.
Yeah, to leave us a comment, because this is a very controversial topic. There's a lot of people pushing low histamine diet. So yeah, let us know what you think. I mean, some people may agree, some people may disagree, but you know what? We're here to chat and we're here to share good information. Thanks for joining us today.
And if you can or can't tell, we're good at chatting. So yeah, thanks so much for joining us, and this was fun.